What is the mindset of a protector? One thing alone can make the difference between failure and success: your mindset. This podcast was created for protectors in the fields of law enforcement, security, and executive protection. Tune in every week where we look in the mirror to make real changes and learn how to achieve greatness by tapping into the Sentinel Mindset. This episode is brought to you by The Arena. The Arena focuses on helping law enforcement and security professionals achieve their ultimate work experience, curriculum, and fitness goals. Visit thearenatoronto.com. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this amazing rendition of the Sentinel Mindset. We have a very, very special guest today. This guest, I had the privilege of watching him in Dallas, Texas, at the IPSB conference, the International Protection Conference. This is where all these protectors come around the world, and it's an amazing, amazing event. This took place in Dallas, Texas this year. And what we want to do is speak to this guest today about a very, very amazing topic that he was speaking about, which was managing major events, public, private efforts. I'm talking today about Brian Bixler. Now, who is Brian Bixler? Well, currently right now, he serves as the Senior Vice President and Chief Operations Officer with Foresight Security Consulting. However, prior to that, he spent 27 years with the Los Angeles Police Department, retiring at the rank of Captain 3, and as the commanding officer of Metropolitan Division, which includes SWAT, K9, Mounted Platoon, Dignitary Protection Unit, and there's a whole ton of them. You cover everything. And then he served as the officer in charge of the Crisis Response Support Section for 5 years, which includes the Threat Management Unit and Mental Evaluation Unit. And he is an internationally recognized expert and speaker, having presented on issues related to policing persons suffering from mental health crisis and threat assessments, amongst many, many associations. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Constantine. It's good to be here. I'm excited to join you guys.
Amazing. You have an amazing way of being able to pull the audience in. I can tell you that sometimes going to presentations as a whole in general, they could look very, very, dull or boring, but you had a way, your presentation was very, it really gravitated our attention. And I'll tell you why. We're in the events industry specifically. A big part of what we do in security is high level events, and a lot of it ties into our executive protection as well. And everything that you brought up is on the surface could be considered so simple, but it's so the common sense aspect, if only this happened as a whole, it could make the industry better. So I'm really, really happy that you spoke about this. But before we get into that, let's find out who Brian is. Brian, I know currently right now, and I read your bio, you are with Foresight Security Consulting. What exactly does Foresight Security Consulting do?
Funny because what we do is a lot of what I did in law enforcement, but on the private side. So I didn't know there was that crossover, which we can talk about later. But Foresight is a kind of a full service security consulting firm. We do everything from protection of high net worth individuals all the way down to behavioral threat assessment and management. We have embedded security managers with media clients in the Pacific Northwest. We have clients all over the country. So we will build customized security solutions for companies, for high net worth individuals, whatever they need. So we can cover the gamut. So we have high net worth individual family offices that we will do the protective security for them. But then they may have somebody who writes a strange email, as we've seen in some of the protective work that you do. You may get a strange letter or somebody who has an unusual fixation on somebody. So we'll do the behavior threat assessment investigation into that person, find out, does this person pose a danger to your principal? Does this person, maybe not a danger, but very annoying to your company or to something. So we'll do that investigation and figure out how best to manage that individual and everything in between. And I'm still learning as I'm just kind of new into this space of what we do, but it's very exciting work.
Amazing. And let me ask you this, with your background, the extensive background that you have, the encyclopedia background that you have, how much of that do you find has really helped you be successful in what you're doing right now?
To a huge degree. And I look back at some of the stuff that I started. I started as a police officer in Hollywood in 1996. On the streets of Hollywood. And so just learning, even the little pieces I learned, one of the first things I had to learn was everybody lies to you. One of the first people I interviewed on the street as a young police officer, and I'm taking my investigation, and my training officer looked at me and goes, "Do you think he told you the truth?" I'm like, why would he not? I'm a police officer. And that was kind of one of those first things that I learned, that that people are deceptive. And so as you move into this space on the private side, like people are deceptive. And so that's kind of why we have a job, right? Is because people are deceptive. And that was one of the first things I had to learn, because in my world, as a young police officer, I'm like, dude, I got a badge on. I'm an LAPD officer. You can't lie to me.
Right.
And
right.
kind of one of the first things. And then everything moving forward kind of informed what we do now. And a lot of it became how I was able to lead and manage people. As I grew in my career, it became less about what I did operationally and how I was able to create synergy and create, develop my people to the point where they were operating at a high level. Okay. And that's where I really enjoyed kind of doing that. That's what I do now as a senior vice president. Now I'm over people and trying to develop them to make them better at what they do.
Okay. No, that's awesome. I do see that, of course, that, even hearing about your experience in policing, what was it for you that made you even want to start in that career? Because a lot of our people here in Canada have massive aspirations to get into the service. There's the baby boomers are now all retiring, and now you have the new wave coming in. For yourself, you said, at what age?
So I was actually 26. So believe it or not, I was an athlete in college, and then I was going to go into sports medicine until I failed chemistry. And I went to actually a small private Christian school, and I was getting straight A's in my Bible class. Okay. And I'm like, well, I might as well make that my major because it's the only thing I'm good at apparently at this time. So, and that actually led me into serving in youth ministry in Santa Barbara and then in Seattle. And my father was a law enforcement officer, and I was actually kind of in between jobs. I was the cold weather in Seattle from a California beach boy. I realized after a year, my wife and I were like, we can't do it.
Right.
And so I was thinking about transitioning back to Southern California. And my brother, who was in law school at the time, went and took the LAPD test. He's like, dude, you should come down and take the test. It was fun. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything Wednesday night. Might as well. So I went down to North Hollywood Police Station, took the test. And 4 months later, I was standing on a black line getting yelled at. So it wasn't like the typical, oh my gosh, I want to be a cop.
Right.
But I knew that once I got there, I'm like, oh, this is what I want to serve people. I want to, when somebody calls 911, I want to be the one to respond and make their life better.
Okay.
And so
I love that. Listen, that's the heart, man. And that's what I love about that is that, it's like you had your calling to do this, to help others, right? Yeah. For yourself coming in and getting yourself to the rank of Captain 3, how long did it take to get there? It
took a while, but, it was, I think I made captain at 24 years.
Okay.
Of being a police officer, but there was several times I passed on taking the captain's test. So in the LAPD, you actually have to apply and take the test. It's not like something they just appoint you. You have to apply and take a test. And I was eligible, I think almost 6 years before I actually took the test.
Okay.
I was eligible to take it. I just decided not to because I felt like there was still work to be done. I was a lieutenant watch commander in Foothill, which I loved being up there. And then I was a lieutenant officer in charge of the crisis response support section, which is something I never even knew existed in the LAPD. And that was getting involved in how we respond to people in a mental health crisis. And I felt that was a lot of work done. And the current chief, who is now outgoing, Michael Moore, actually asked me one time, hey, Brian, how did the test go for the captain's test? And I was standing with my wife and I said, sir, I didn't take the test. And he kind of gave me that look like, really? And at the time I was coaching my kids in track and field and in football. And I knew that if I made the step to captain, it would your life kind of goes away.
Right.
So I said, look, sir, I really felt like as a family, we sat down and had a family meeting and we prayed about it. And it was not the right time. And he looked at me and he looked at my wife and he goes, well, I guess I can't argue with that, can I?
Right.
And so it took me a while, but I think it was perfect timing. I think it was, by the time I did make captain, I was ready.
Okay.
My family was ready. I didn't have to sacrifice my family to make rank, which I know a lot of people do. And it's unfortunate and for me, it was just perfect timing. And
I think that's so important. I'm glad that you had that calculated epiphany at that time frame.
Yeah.
For yourself. So the jurisdiction that you would look after in California, you said Los Angeles?
Yes, the city of Los Angeles.
So just for those listening, because again, I think it's always very interesting. What also drew me in is a lot of the examples when we get into the topic that you were talking about, you were drawing from like the Oscars, you're drawing from like parades that would happen. What's it like policing in LA? Just to kind of throw it out there. And I know it could be a very vague question, but just in general.
Yeah. So just to kind of get the scope of it, there are 21 geographic divisions, which means 21 police stations in the city of Los Angeles. So you've got the state of California, which has the California Highway Patrol, who does the highways. Then you've got counties. So there's county sheriffs that patrol those or have jurisdiction over those. And then your municipalities, your cities. And most of those have police departments that are specific to that city alone. So that's the LAPD. But the LAPD is so big because there's 21 police stations within the city of Los Angeles. Each of those stations has almost 300 patrol officers and detectives assigned to that one division alone.
Wow.
Then there's all the specialized units, like the Metropolitan Division had citywide jurisdiction. So it covered all 21 geographic divisions, but we were the specialized response mechanism. So just patrolling, you could be in Hollywood, which is, it's designated the number 6 division. And you could work there your entire career and never see somebody who worked Harbor Division. You work the same police department, but you may never know who they are because you're so separated by geography. And it was a blast. I'm telling you, man, like the things you could do in LA, the stuff you were exposed to in Hollywood alone, you would respond to a celebrity's house for a loud party call. And I had celebrities, so I had to wake up off the couch and go, hey, we need to shut down your party. And then the next call you could be was a gang shooting down south of Santa Monica Boulevard, and everything in between. So I think there was such a variety of things you could do in LA that made it so unique.
Right.
You get the big events like Super Bowls and the Oscars and everything in between, sports parades and all that stuff that I kind of talked about. So there was never a moment where you were like, this is boring.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always something new going on.
Amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So this is the perfect segue. So again, I was very drawn in by your presentation. And one of the things that I pulled from there is like, I got to have Brian on to talk about, how police and security entities that cover, for example, executive protection or general security, how they could work together and bring value to each other with a lot of these large events that take place. So what I want to start off with, and this is coming from your presentation, because you did a great job of like, what is the perception of police with security? So I think we should do this and vice versa. When you look at, I'll tell you from our experiences in Toronto, we do a lot of events, and typically from what I gather, police are almost annoyed by security. They're annoyed, like, wannabe cops, or, that they want to come in and kind of just, get excited and get into the action scenes. So I've always found that was that level. Like, they're very annoyed. And also what doesn't help the cause is that there's a lot of agencies here that provide very poor level of service or personnel. And that also, attributes to that as well, to that stereotype. So from your perspective, what would you say is the general, look from police to security? Yeah.
So it's, one of the first terms I think I remember hearing about security was, they're a rent-a-cop.
Right.
And so like, they're not full-time law enforcement. These are part-time jobs. They're kind of the guys that couldn't pass muster and become police officers. While that may be true, I think one of the things I said from the stage was, the funny thing is that even when we have those perceptions, at least in LA, most of the time, the guys who were on the private security side were off-duty cops. Like, we're all the same level of professional.
Right.
But there is just that perception of, you couldn't make it, or, you're not important enough. And when I realized, and what we talked about from the stage, is a lot of times it's not that, it's more of difference in mission. Like, the mission of a law enforcement officer is life safety first. And then, as I said, like a lot of the protectors, it's protecting the principal and protecting the brand. And so they're kind of looking at things too differently. But we also, I think what I said is, we all have too high of an opinion of ourselves and our mission and our goal. Like, when we take it out of where, I think the term that I heard when I was at that conference, which I still kind of think about and go, they use the term protector.
Right. And I love that word.
It is so good, because then when you say that in the context of a protector being a police officer or a private, executive protection specialist, it's the same role.
Right.
you're a protector. And I think your logo, like the Sentinel Mindset, you've got the Spartan, and with the brain, it's like the brain's and the brawn.
That's right.
And it's both things exist. And so I think the protector, and when I use that term and I go, that's a unifying term. So we look at all these different things that tear us apart. Well, in LAPD, we're so proud of our uniform. We look sharp. We look, and you look at somebody else at other agencies, and I go, yeah, you look horrible uniform. And so, but when you realize our mission is the same, I think that's the thing that brings us together. So yes, we all have posturing, I would say. Even heck, we have, like in LAPD, we have intramural sports leagues between division to division, and that same thing exists. Oh, you're a Valley cop. You're not a real cop. I work the South End. I work the ghetto.
Right.
You have no idea. So I think those things exist no matter what, if it's agency to agency, or protector to police officer. So yeah, there's all those things we have to deal with, but I think a lot of it just comes down to, I don't know, teenagers on a playground.
Yeah,
sometimes.
no, 100%. And look, one of the things in the industry, I'll speak from the security industry specifically. I'm going to target the executive protection side. The one thing that I've talked about, and it's very, very well known, is the ego lives in our industry. It's very, very prominent there. You have all these alphas. They all feel like, they're God's gift to the world. They all feel that they bring like X, Y, Z, so they have the ability to do this and that. So that you're right. If everyone just parked the ego and came in, what is our objective here? Our objective is for this positive outcome. How do we get there? And what can we all do to get there? Like as a team, it look at it very different. So that's amazing that you brought that. When you look at, just because this is going to kind of cross, so we talked about policing, how they perceive security. Now, the opposite, you also brought this up in your presentation, how does security perceive police, right?
Yeah.
So for the most part, I can tell you in executive protection, a lot of times when we've hired people, you get a lot of police that like to kind of get into that world as well, right? Now, for us, we don't, an active police officer cannot work executive protection. It's a big conflict of interest in Canada. So them, the only way they can do that is once they retire. However, executive protection does bring a different skill set than what a police officer. So how do you find, from your experiences, that executive protection look at security now, on the reverse now?
You mean executive protection look at police, or executive protection?
Yeah. How look at the police world right now to reverse the roles?
So they, like, executive protection sometimes will look at police officers like, we're privileged. We can just stand there. We don't have to respond like, oh, your problem's too low for me. One of the things, like, if an executive protection would come up to a police officer standing a post and say, hey, can I talk to you about X, Y, and Z? I've got more important things to do. And that's a lot of the things, like, as a police officer, I've got more important things, or, they look at us like we have more important things to do. But a lot of times, like, that police officer has a role to do in their role. But a lot of times, and I'm saying from the police officers, we go like, I don't have time to tell you why what I'm doing is important.
Right.
So I think a lot of times the EP professionals and the private security professionals can look at cops like, one, your ego. Again, to me, it comes down to ego. That you're too important for me.
Right.
And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've seen. And I find that with just the public in general, like when I was able to go, just a minute, ma'am, and then turn and have a conversation without compromising my safety with somebody, that changed the perception immediately. And I think from a law enforcement perspective, if we were able to just go, hey, yeah, what's up, bud? What do you need? Like, and engage with that person, that totally changes perspective, but we don't do that enough.
Right.
And again, I think there is just the ego, the importance, or even sometimes my mission is this. So I can't even take the time to talk to you about whatever it is. Your thing is too small. And I think that's one of the biggest things.
Okay, no, for sure. And I much agree with that. So Brian, let me ask you this then. So if we know that there is these like little obstacles, I call them little because they're so easy to overcome, right? And you also gave some really cool examples of, like, I believe you were referencing an example. It was the Santa Claus parade, and then you guys were all like talking different departments, and then something happened, and it's like, oh, if this group didn't know this, if they had that information, or when walkthroughs or advances are happening, who should be involved. If you can pick from any story that you think the audience could take value of, an example of, the importance of two entities working together for like a large event, and the benefits, maybe using a real life example that you witnessed that could have gone this way if everyone was pulled together, or vice versa, something that went positive.
Yeah, I mean, I'll use the Oscars. As I said, there was some changes that came out of that event. And I referenced that when Will Smith came up on stage and slapped Chris Rock, and there was so much confusion backstage. Was this staged? Was this real? And then there was just no communication between the private side and the police side. The police were like,
hold on. I want to slow down because this is actually good. This is actually one of the things that I wanted to bring up. And you showed the clip. You showed the full clip, right? Let's just talk about that for a bit, because I think it's important to kind of understand like what's going through your mind. You've already done your planning. You've done your advances. You've gone through over everything. And to your point, everyone thought, including myself, when I first saw that, I'm like, this is staged. Like, there's no way. You mentioned what happened in real time from your end when this was going on and how people were perceiving it. I think that's very interesting. Can you share that?
Sure. So one of my good friends, his name's Jay Roberts. He's a captain, currently the commanding officer of Rampart Division. And he was the interior branch director for the Oscars. So he was the only LAPD sworn member who was inside the venue. They didn't want uniformed police officers. He was in a tuxedo. He had all past credentials. And he was backstage at the time. So he's standing back there next to a backstage manager who has a control panel, all the monitors. And he could kind of hear something happen. And he looked at the monitor and saw the reaction of crowds. And then he goes, did something just happen? And you could see the controller looking at the screen going, yeah, something just happened. And he goes, what happened? Will Smith just came up on stage and hit Chris Rock. And he's like, again, the question, wait, was that supposed to happen? And the guy's like, So at that time, he's like, okay. So then the phones start ringing. Jay, what happened? We're getting word out here at the command post. What's going on? Hey, let me try and find out what just happened, because it was big news, right?
Right.
And so then he went to go and meet with Chris Rock, and the private industry folks and the EP guys stopped him and said, you can't come over here. And he's like, and that's one of the things I said. I think one of the biggest things is one of the worst things we all don't like hearing, or one of the things that's most irritating, is when somebody says, don't you know who I am?
Right.
And usually it's somebody trying to get to a police line, but this is a police officer, and he's like, don't you know who I am? Because he's got the big credentials that said, Captain Jay Roberts. And so he's like trying to get in to try and investigate, like, do we need to do something? What happened?
Right.
And that's where the communication broke down. They wouldn't let him in. He was trying to get a hold of the person who was in charge of the private side. Communications didn't work. I think there was a dead cell zone. Radios didn't work. Like everything failed.
Right.
And so he's getting yelled at by, the chief of police, and everything started happening. And finally he was able, like, look, I just need to talk to him to get this figured out. And so they were able to start working it out. But what we realized is that the communications plan was not delineated of, okay, if I can't get a hold of this person, who's next?
Right.
And that's kind of just as you know, on big major events, that chain of command and that communication piece is huge.
Right.
And then also, when we met, everybody's sharing their priorities. And I think it talked about their mission objectives.
Right.
Like, okay, your mission objectives are these, but where do they overlap? And when this happens, who's gonna do that? So I think those were things that kind of broke down. Mm-hmm. And luckily afterwards, they were able to get together and take their egos out of it and say, okay, what could I have done better on the police side? And what could you have done better on the private side? Which led to some changes for the following year's Oscars.
And that's important. That debriefing is important. And look, situations like that, like I'm pretty sure right now, because it's something that nobody ever experienced before. I mean, no one's ever seen something like that on an Oscar level. And now that it's happened, someone can say, well, that's a possibility. So it's very hard to plan for the unknown, right?
Absolutely.
But so what advice would you give then for either entity, whether it be in the security or the policing? How do you even try to plan for something like that? Because it's so hard, because you're picking one thing out of thousands of possible possibilities. Is there something that you can, and obviously we know we got to do emergency, for example, response, and how you can deal with that if you have to have a bunch of people eject the site. How do you do even that? How do you start?
You start by, I mean, one of the things we talk about, and you probably have done this too, is tabletops. It is sitting around a table and going, okay, here's a scenario. And we do this with our protection folks now in Foresight.
Mm-hmm.
We'll sit down and we have a weekly meeting. We go, okay, you're working and this thing happens. What is the next step? What is the next step? What is the next step? So I think it's basically like the mindset. It is getting in the mindset of you don't know what you're going to impact, but what's most important now? What is your primary mission? My primary mission is now life safety. So from that, it's then protection of property, and then so there's you make sure that the priorities, you know what your priorities are, and you start there. And so any scenario, you work through the same things. What is my priority? Who needs to know about it? What am I going to do? So you start working those things, and no matter what the scenario is, the more you run through those things together as a team,
right?
Then you can sharpen it. Well, okay, you missed this piece on communication. You need to let this person know so they can respond. So I think by having those exercises, they go from simple tabletop exercises to now full scale, as I'm sure you do in your training. And,
yes.
and I know you guys do a lot of work with physical combat stuff. And okay, what if the person does this? Now, what if they do this? And the what ifs are endless, but the what ifs sharpen your mind so that no matter what, you are thinking about those things. And so that's how we do it a lot is, okay, we're going to get together with everybody, EP professionals, the private side, the venue director, and all of our folks. Okay, we're going to sit down at a table and somebody comes up with a scenario and then we just start working the problem.
Absolutely.
And if you do that enough, it becomes kind of a mindset of how you problem solve.
I think that's so key, especially some of the entities that you said should be at the table. Because I'll give you an example. We're doing an event coming up in the next couple of weeks. It's a very, very large sporting event. And, when I was talking to the organizer, he was like, okay, well, I'm going to need 26 security and don't worry about management. We're going to manage it. I'm like, okay, hold on. Let's take back 25 steps here. We need to sit down. We need a walkthrough. We need to see the maps. We need to have a meeting, right? But their mindset was very quick to, I just need this number. Let's just get that number and we'll meet you in the day of. And that's like a recipe of complete failure. Anything can go wrong at any given time, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's key that I think the people that you're saying should be at the table. I mean, if there is an event planner coming into place, you should have all parties to bounce off of. And I think that should happen every single time that these go on.
Absolutely.
When you did them, did you always have, like, for the most part, was there a good variety of people that you can kind of bounce off and say, look, it's important for the event planner to be here. It's important for security to also be here. Did you have any of those experiences that you saw also benefited a positive outcome?
Absolutely. And I think some of those big events was having those people in the room. For example, one of the most recent that I was a part of was the Rams Super Bowl celebration. And the NFL was represented in the room. Also the event organizer, the person who was going to organize the stage, the presentation, they have the bus tour and then they end up on a stage and everyone wants to give speeches and stuff. And so having those people in the room, as well as it was on state property. Part of it was on state property. Part of it was on private property. So having all of those entities, because we had to have the state security as well as private security, as well as LAPD, and all of those people had to be in the room. And I thought that was one of those events where, although everything didn't go perfectly, there was good communication. We all knew who was in charge of what and who to contact for what. And that made a huge difference. And there was times early on in my career and other events where that didn't happen. We're like, well, where's this person? Oh, they couldn't make it. Okay, move on anyway. Instead of, no, we need to have them here. But a lot of times it just didn't happen. And because we're on a crunch timeline or whatever, we're like, whatever, we'll just move on. And things didn't go completely sideways, but they very easily could have. Okay. So I think that was one example of having all the right people in the right room, even though it was like, you didn't know that the Rams were going to win the Super Bowl until they did. And then they're like, hey, we're having this huge event in a week and a half. So time crunch, but made sure that everybody was in the room that needed to be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, let me ask you this, because, event planner, a lot of it starts with the event planner, putting it into place. And we do deal with a lot of event planners and organizers. What advice would you give them? Meaning as in, like, they're hearing right now, I'm going to be putting on a large event. From a protection standpoint, what advice would you give them that they should have? Like, you got to make sure you have this as a fundamental.
check your ego.
Okay.
1, check your ego at the door. 2, be open to the professionals. I think a lot of times when we try to speak into, you, me, and in our field, and we try to speak into, and we say, look, we see this as a potential issue. We would like to use this to address it. A lot of times they're like, well, the budget doesn't allow that, or I think I've done this before and that's not an issue. I think for them to, if you're going to hire a firm like yours, or mine, and to listen to the professionals, we have the experience, the knowledge, and the background to make these decisions and to make your event safer. And I think a lot of times they will, due to budgetary constraints or whatever, they put that to the side. And I think that is a mistake. And I think that, organizers, if you're going to hire a firm, listen to them. You hire them for a reason and use their expertise instead of just checking the box. So I think a lot of times they will say, well, we need to have a security firm. So we will, like you said, we need 26 people, check the box. And I think a lot of times we work in a checkbox world and forget the why. So I think that for them to understand the why of what we do and why we do it, because if it comes down to, hard protecting, we need to put up, K-rails and barriers so there's not a vehicle-borne attack or whatever it is, it's because we've seen that happen. The possibilities are small, but when they do happen, the consequences are incalculable. So I think that is the biggest thing. Check your ego and listen to the experts.
No, that's very sound advice. When you were in LA and a lot of these events were happening, did you find, I know this is probably something that wouldn't be like a raised number, but did you find there was budget always, like, talks about budgets? Oh, we can't have this many people. Like, it's going to cost too much. Did you guys have to deal with those? Because you guys do things on a very grand level.
Sure. For us, like if I had, like the chief said, hey, Brian, we're having this event, I need you to staff it. I just did it. Like we didn't have, we had almost 10,000 police officers at our disposal. So It was never for us. Yeah, there was budget, there was overtime, but when it came to big events, it was kind of like just blank check for us.
Right.
Now, I think that's changing now where they're starting to say, well, if you are an event organizer, like the Motion Picture Academy, you're going to have to pay for police services now, which is a total change.
Right.
And so now I don't know how that's going to change, but I know budget's a big piece of it. Now on the private side, that's one of the things I'm like, wait, we have to turn a profit? That's a thing.
Right.
I had to deal with that in the public sector. So, But yeah, budgets are always going to be a part of it.
Yes.
But with the police, we were in public safety and we just did it.
Yeah. And well, that's important. That's important that there's a fundamental there, because with the private side, it's always being scrutinized by cost, and then decisions are being made on budgets. So wait a second, if you remove these positions, you're going to create issues potentially, right? So, kind of going full circle in the benefits of security and police working together. What could we do in the security industry, whether you're just private security or if you're in the executive protection? What could we do to help police when we're at these events? I mean, obviously outside of our general duties that we're doing, whether that is the goal is to protect a client or protect asset venue, what could we do to support police?
So I think one, it happens before the event. One is the relationship building, and probably you have a really good ability, and you probably have done this. Like, you got to build those relationships before the event,
right?
So that it's not just you're a no name, nobody's seen your face before, and you're showing up to this event. It's building the credibility ahead of time, and that can be done so many different ways. Just being at the meetings, participating when there's not a crisis, when there's not an event. So if there's a community event, you show up and are in those rooms and with the police to start building those relationships. So to me, that's the biggest piece, and I think that doesn't happen enough. And even on the police side, like, to go to community events and be around things so that we're building those relationships before that event happens. But at the event, one of the biggest things is to, one, acknowledge each other. Hey, how's it going? I mean, just a simple, friendly, how's it going, man? You doing okay tonight? Cool. Hey, I got some water. Need me? Like, it's that brotherhood. And I speak that in very generically non-sexist terms, but what can I do? So I think there's that camaraderie building that needs to happen the time of, and then for whoever is in charge of your detail to find the person who's in charge of the detail. Hey, can I just have a quick moment of your time? What do you guys need from us? It's that we're here to serve. How can we help? And I think even just that attitude of not what can you do for me, but what can I do for you? That's just human nature, but I think that pays dividends in these type of events as well.
I love that. And it speaks to the heart again. I mean, we've done that many times, especially in the EP world. You're going to do your advance, you're going to go to a hotel, or you're going to go to a venue and say, hey, listen, this is your house. We're here. We're going to be bringing our client. You want to establish that rapport to get a positive outcome. So I love that, what you said.
Yeah.
Do you still reside in California?
I do.
Okay.
I do. Yeah.
So let's just say we're going to have some fun right now. Let's just say I'm the governor of California. Okay. And I say, Brian, you have, I'm going to give you 2 wishes. Basically, if there's one thing that you want to see changed in policing in California, and there's one thing I want to see change in the security world in California, is there anything at all that would come to your mind?
Acknowledge the sacrifice that is being made by police officers on a daily basis. There are some politicians who do that, but it's become so politically divisive for us on one side of the political spectrum. If you were to say anything positive about the police, you're attacked. And the other side, if you are saying things positive about the police, you're automatically put into a corner of, oh, you're so far right, you're whatever. And I think there just needs to be an acknowledgement of the sacrifice, and not when the big events happen, but it's on the daily. It's when, the police officers out there, like right now, we've got the weather is crazy up in the Pacific Northwest. We don't have that here, but those officers who are they're doing their patrol duty in the middle of the night, sacrificing their family. I remember, like, my wife, after 26 years, she goes, when I retired, she goes, you do know I was scared for 27 years. And I was like, wow, really? So to acknowledge, I think, that on just a very real level, to me, that's one of the biggest things. I'm big on kind of the emotional toll that law enforcement takes on our officers and their families, divorce rate, all that stuff. So I think that just acknowledging that from the highest level, to me, makes a huge, huge difference. So that'd be one thing. All the other funding stuff is just, that's important. Well, but I tell you what, I think I was a quote by Napoleon, give me a few bits of ribbon and some good men and I can conquer the world. Basically, you acknowledge the hard work of your people and they'll run through a wall for you. So I think that's that one piece. And what was the second part of your question?
The second part is if you could change based on your experiences in the security world that you see, that you like to see it happen. Which is kind of your world right now, right? Yeah,
it is. I don't know. I think in the state of California, just, I think I'm not quite sure yet, other than some of the regulations for concealed carry for us. Again,
yes.
It was very rare for me to do a traffic stop in the city of LA and not find a gun in a gangster's car or a bad guy's car. So to be able to have our executive protection, like, it's hard to get a concealed carry permit here. There's a battle against it. And I think for our EP guys, it's important, especially given here. I mean, how many times have I seen people approach a celebrity and there aren't? People approach a high net worth individual and they're dangerous and they're armed. And I think they will better allow our EP professionals, because right now, to be able to do that, almost like you have to be a police officer, a retired police officer.
Okay.
I think it's more difficult for them. So to me, that's one of those things. Because again, to be a protector, you guys do a lot of hand-to-hand combat. And if somebody produces a firearm from 10 feet away, other than putting yourself in between that bullet and your principal, not a whole lot you can do at that point.
No, and we have very similar laws in Canada. I mean, I'll tell you, when I was in Texas, when we were in Dallas, and I said to one of my producer who was with me, I said, why don't you want to go shoot some guns? And he's like, really? Are we going to be able to? I just pick up the phone. I go, can I? And they said, yeah, come on in. It was so easy down there, right? So obviously every state is different. But though, thank you for sharing that. And to your first point, I do want to say this, Brian, even though you're not serving right now as a police officer, I want to thank you for what you did do, because the reality is a lot of people, and look, I'm a very big advocate of police. Of course, there's bad apples in every industry, but those bad apples cannot overshadow the entire service in every country in all the world. It just cannot happen. It's unfair. No. The reality is, whenever you put that uniform on and you leave the house, your life is at a higher elevated risk than any other average person is.
Absolutely.
That's the truth. So I respect what you do. I respect what the police do, and I appreciate what they do. And I want to thank you for the years of service that you put down. And I know the benefits of that were incredible. So thank you for that, Brian.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. And again, those are the words that are heartfelt and aren't said enough. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate it.
No, amazing, man. I really do value that. I really want to thank you for sharing what you shared today. We really do want to see the protection world. I mean, we identify as protectors here. As we said earlier, I love that name and the action and the heart behind it. We even reference it. I know we talked to some friends in the U.S. like the protector's DNA, right? It's in our body. It's in, and I feel that everyone has a level of protector's DNA. It's just whether sometimes they know it or not. Like they got to tap into it sometimes, right? So I think the value of what you brought down today about things that we can do on just a simple level to be able to work together. The world is getting more dangerous, and it's just you just gotta sometimes go beyond the news and just see what's happening. We need to be in that position to work together. So, any last words that you would want to give for anyone listening on the effectiveness of ways we can move together to achieve greatness in our industry?
Yeah, I think it's realizing that we are the same. We are protectors. I think the word sheepdog, and you probably heard the sheepdog analogy. To me, it's the same thing. We do the same work. EP is a little more like specific to a certain person, and police work is more generalized. But we are protectors. We're protecting, and not that I think people are sheep, but there are wolves out there, and they will attack unless the people they're going to attack are protected.
That's right.
And I think as we work together to harden the target, to make our society, our events, our people safer, we just need to realize we're doing the exact same job. The uniform may look a little different. The way we get it done may look a little different, but we all want the same things and we're all going towards the same goal. So keep up the good work out there. The protectors that are out there doing the hard work every day in and day out, the police officers and who are doing this hard work day in and day out, and our military, just God bless you guys. And thank you so much for everything you do.
That's awesome. Very well said. Brett, how do people find you? I see that beautiful logo, Foresight Security Consulting on your sweater. How do people find you? How do they connect if they want to tap into more of what you bring you out to have a conversation or a talk, or even utilize the services of Foresight?
Absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. My email address, I'll put it out there. It's brian.bixler, brian.bixler at foresight-securityconsulting.com. And more than happy to connect with you. I am in Southern California. If you're here and want to get together for a cup of coffee or a adult beverage, then I am more than happy to meet up and discuss what we do. So yeah, and hopefully I get up to Toronto someday.
Amazing. And for those listening, Brian is that receptive. I approached him at the end of his conversation, just as about an hour on there, and there was a bunch of people lined up to kind of conversate with you. And thank you for giving me that time to grab that. So I really do want to thank you again for being on the show. Very, very insightful. And blessings on your life, man. Blessings on your life and what you're doing. It's impactful, and I cannot wait to share this. And hopefully we get a chance to actually meet. When I do make my way down there, I will definitely be reaching out to you.
Absolutely, and I'm sure we'll see each other again. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you very much, everyone, and stay safe. Thank you for joining me in today's podcast. This podcast was created for protectors in the fields of law enforcement, executive protection, security, and anyone looking to level up their mindset. If you are learning from this podcast and you're enjoying it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Sentinel Mindset. That's a zero-cost way to support us. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast both on Spotify and Apple. And on both Spotify and Apple, you can leave us up to a 5-star review. If you have questions for me or comments about the podcast or guests you would like me to consider on the Sentinel Mindset, please post all comments on YouTube. I do read all the comments. Please also check out our sponsors, thearenatoronto.com. The Arena was created to help all those in the fields of law enforcement, security, and all that achieve their fitness goals. I want to thank our producer, Matthew Doyle, and creative supports, Jaslene Singh, who help me with this podcast every week. We value your feedback and are here to support you. Tune into the Sentinel Mindset every week, where we look in the mirror to make real changes and explore what it takes to achieve greatness in your craft.
This podcast is brought to you by Executive Protection Lifestyle Canada. Make sure to drop by next week and don't forget to subscribe.